Hi everyone, I'm making you another screencast video so that you understand my expectations for reading response number 6. First, for this reading response, you're going to view some videos. Whoops, I apologize, it just went down. You're going to be watching these videos. Specifically, these videos feature two math teachers, and interestingly, they're not it's not under the umbrella of interdisciplinary teaching. However, what I really like about these videos that I relate to interdisciplinary teaching is that these two math teachers are really thinking out of the box. So I really hope that you find inspiration, whether you're math or not. I'm not in the math area, and I absolutely take so much from watching these two teachers. I really think their ideas fall under everything we've been talking about this semester. They're both thinking about ways to engage their students, and they're really making their planning around larger conceptual ideas. And that's what's tied into interdisciplinary teaching, is you have to think at that conceptual level. And so often students experience math in a very more isolated, at the factual level, and the facts are important. But when we think outside of the box, students' learning can really increase. Another interesting, some studies have come out through the years that math teachers and even not non-math teachers struggle with thinking about how math teachers can do interdisciplinary teaching. And while the research has said that, I tend to disagree, because I have worked with math teachers for the last 20 years that have overcome the obstacles. And I think it's because they think like these two math teachers. They see that math is everywhere in the world, and that there's always a larger context for learning the specifics to math. And again, while the research might say that math teachers might struggle with interdisciplinary design, from my own anecdotal data and from my personal experiences working with pre-service math teachers and also working with experienced veteran math teachers, I don't think that's the case. So again, I just wanted to share these videos as a point of inspiration in how math teachers are thinking largely about math concepts. So after you watch those, they're very brief. I want you to start drafting a master calendar. This reading response is all about supporting you to get ready for your interdisciplinary workshops that we'll be having for the rest of the semester. So when you come to class and you're working with your interdisciplinary team, you can share what you have thought about with regards to the theme that your team has selected. So at this point, you can't jump into this assignment until your team has confirmed a couple things. First, you have to have all agreed on a theme or an essential question that is driving your unit plan, and I have to approve that. So if you have that approval, that is the first step. Secondly, your team has written some enduring understandings or generalizations. I suggest you have a minimum of 2 to 4. So again, you want to come up with 2 to 4. This will also make sense as I talk about it in class, but you need to also get my feedback and approval. So once you have that, you can begin this assignment. So check in with your team. I will be reminding you in class, but check in with your team to make sure that you're all on the same page when beginning this draft of the master calendar. So let's say your team has selected 3 enduring understandings. Maybe your team has all agreed that for this reading response number 6, which I will allow you guys to have some time in class to discuss, maybe you have, you're all going to come up with at least 3 lesson ideas for your respective discipline areas. And that means when you come to class, you're going to have at least 9 lesson ideas to share, so that you can all begin to see how you can put your master calendar cohesively together. And then, or maybe your team wants to focus on 2 enduring understandings, and you want to come up with at least 5 lesson ideas for those 2. That means you would bring up to maybe 10 lesson ideas to share with your team members. There's flexibility here. Just make sure that you guys are on the same page, because this is preparing you for a really thoughtful workshop in class. Think of the flipped classroom. So I'm kind of thinking about you're doing the work outside of class so that when you get to class, you and your team can have a very productive session in starting to look at how your calendars are coming together. So once you have confirmed your theme and your enduring understandings, also called generalizations, that's why I use this language interchangeably, because I've worked at a lot of schools and they use these interchangeably. So I just want you to be prepared with that language when you get out there in the field. You need to find at least one standard. You all use the Common Core, but of course, if you are social studies, if you are science or world language, you're going to also need to look at your content area standards. This is all evident. All of you that have taught your lesson plan, you know where to find these on LaLima. This will guide your planning, so you have to find that standard. You're all responsible for your specific areas. This is where you are driving your own reading for this assignment. I'm not requiring you to read anything, but you want to start researching your standard. Maybe you want to Google lesson ideas for the standard. Teachingchannel.org is a wonderful resource. You want to start looking also at other unit plans with your theme in mind to see how other math or science or social studies teachers or English teachers or world language teachers have thought. That might be a springboard of creativity and inspiration for you as you think about your lesson ideas. Of course, if you do want to use something that exists out there, make sure that you are being responsible with citing it and not plagiarizing anyone else's unit planning out there. But you can definitely gain inspiration and adapt ideas out there. Just keep a running bibliography if you're finding other ideas. So what you need to do is you want to start mapping out your master calendar. You want to write down your possible lesson titles, resources, and literacy strategies and or activities that are going to support the theme. So I'm going to jump to this page. So this is the master calendar example that I've posted on LaLima. This just represents 1 week. You have to have a minimum of 2 weeks. So, and again, this assignment requires you to at least think of 7 to 10 ideas, which is almost up to 2 weeks. You might also, your team might also plan a 3 or 4 week unit. It's all up to your team. But again, just to meet the minimum, let me just share with you how I start out my conceptual planning when I was a teacher. When I was a middle school teacher, I actually worked in an interdisciplinary team, and I was an English language arts teacher, so I was in charge of my area. And for this theme, the larger idea, the big umbrella is thriving to survive. Again, this is such a terrific concept because it's so large that any teacher can do anything with this. I mean, it's so open-ended. But when, as long as it keeps honing in on the idea that the idea of survival. For this enduring understanding, for just this week, the focus is we must eat to survive. So that's a little bit more specific, but it still has to do with the concept of survival. So for this one, this interdisciplinary team, which only makes up, this is only an example of English, science, math, and social studies. This team has decided that they're going to kick off their lesson with a field trip to a local farm that's going to help them start thinking about this. This is guiding you. This is always guiding you. This is the larger idea, but to get a little bit more specific for the week, this is what you want your students to remember 20 years from now. They're going to forget all the little key ideas. I mean, certain facts do stay with kids for a long time, but at the end of the day, you want them to think that you want them to always remember this big idea. And that's why it is an enduring understanding, because it's to endure. Enduring, you don't want them to forget how important it is for them to understand survival. And that the way we eat and the way we think about food is so connected to our daily lives. And it requires a lot of complex, deep thinking about how we're going to have a sustainable environment to allow us to eat and survive with this food. When you think about all the controversial things happening with our food source and GMOs and all of that, these are huge ideas that connect us all because we have to eat. So anyway, I'm getting off a little bit on the side, but what's exciting about being the English teacher on this team is I have to start plotting out. I have first my responsibility, just like every teacher, I have to find the standard that I'm teaching to. Notice the standard doesn't tell me at all that I'm going to be talking about, that I'm going to have students write arguments about eating to survive. It just tells me as the English teacher that I am responsible for teaching the students how to write arguments, and that takes time. I cannot teach this standard in one day. I cannot go to my class and say, write an argument by the end of the period without teaching them what an argument is and giving them the time to have inquiry, to create arguments, and to write those claims. This is why it's a unit plan. It takes one lesson after another to get my students ready to write that argument. But this is where I'm headed, and this is why I put it the first day. I don't need to keep writing the standard, but all of these lessons support the standard. And if you scroll down, every teacher has a standard. Now, social studies is also, they have a Common Core where they're going to teach specific textual evidence. So the lessons here have to get the students thinking about text evidence using primary and secondary sources. And then also for looking at eating to survive here in Hawaii, they're going to get into some of the Hawaiian history, which is why this Hawaii content standard really works for this lesson. And in science, the science teacher is going to use this Common Core science standard by teaching the students how to precisely carry out a procedure and an experiment. Again, you can't tell your kids to do an experiment in one day and say, okay, I taught the standard. This takes day after day after day lessons to get the students ready to understand this standard. So each teacher has selected one. And for math, let's look at the math standard. In math, the math teacher has found this one: using proportional relationships to solve multi-step ratio and percent problems. Again, this takes several days to teach the standard, which is why this standard is helping you think about what will your students be able to show that demonstrate what they learn by the end of the unit plan. Now, in order to get this ready, which I love, is because this is interdisciplinary, they're going to start off at the farm. So the kickoff lesson, they all have a similar title, but each discipline area had to think about a strategy that supports this standard. And for this one, the teacher is going to have the students keep a measure log where they're going to be because they're on the farm all day long, they're going to be able to measure different areas, which is going to be data that they're going to be able to start exploring about proportional ideals for growing food. Again, what I love about the standard, it doesn't tell the teacher, okay, it doesn't tell us what we're going to do. It doesn't tell us the resources we need. The creativity comes from the teacher to be able to say, how am I going to teach proportional relationships? In some math classes, they might just give a student a worksheet and get up on the whiteboard and lecture on how to do that. But in this case, this teacher is being very creative and saying we can go to the farm, we can learn that we all must eat to survive, and that farmers have to have mathematical knowledge to be able to demonstrate how this can happen. And every teacher needs to teach their students literacy strategies. And as you can see, the literacy strategies are throughout this plan, as these strategies all begin to help the students to make meaning of the content that's going to be taught. So again, check out, I'm not going to go over all of them, but check this out in each area, how the teacher is using, each day you can see the lesson titles. Again, in science, this teacher is thinking about how they're going to test the farm soil, because they're collecting samples from the soil. They're collecting those soil samples, and how they're going to also collect the soil from their own school, and they're going to be able to test these different soils and begin to compare and contrast. Again, the standard says all I have to do is teach my students how to do an experiment and to carry out these measurements, but it doesn't tell me to collect soil. That's the creativity of the teacher. Which again is why I like the standards. They're so general that you get to bring your creativity. So again, go through this example, and you're welcome to copy and paste this calendar example into your own file so that you can begin to write your own ideas and plug in your own generalization. Make sure that your titles, like an objective, are confirming to me that you've done the deep thinking. Now, if I were a substitute teacher and you handed me this unit plan, would I be ready to teach tomorrow? Would I know how to do this? I can see that you're giving me a general idea, but at the end of the day, you know, unless this isn't really preparing me to go to be ready. There's no scripts here like you've seen in your individual lesson plans. That's not the level of detail that I'm expecting, but I am expecting you to do the thoughtful thinking work that shows that you have thought through, well, if the kids do this on the first day, the next day I need them to do this, the next day I need them to do this on Wednesday, I need them to do this on Thursday, so that we can all meet this goal of the standard. And I'm doing this thoughtfully as it relates always to the generalization, and it relates to what I need to do as a disciplined teacher, and that I have provided a lot of strategies so that my students are engaged. That means I'm always having them either talking, viewing, writing, reading, and socially interacting with each other. I'm keeping things hands-on. I've also been very resourceful in that I'm going to have them reading certain experts. I'm going to be having them view videos, and my videos and my resources are listed here. Again, this isn't a bibliography, but the basics are in here so that I can find it on the internet. I have thought all this through. So this is what's due by the end of the semester. I want to be able to see you are graded individually by the work you do here. So if for some reason you fell short and you didn't have all your literacy strategies, you would be marked down. Whereas, let's say I read the social studies map, and your team member has completed that. That's why you're graded individually. But I still want to see how your calendar is all put together, so that if I am a student in your class, I want to see what my Monday in English looks like. Obviously, there's a field trip, and I know that in the field trip is being honored also within each of the discipline areas, and that all of you are teaching to the same theme, so that students are really learning from each of your discipline lenses how to examine this larger idea of thriving to survive. So again, I've said a lot here. I hope that you have found this helpful. I think you'll also find it helpful as we continue to talk about this in class. I will be reviewing all of your master calendar drafts, and I'll give you more information in class and reminders of when those will be due. But this is what you should be working on from here on out. Every week, be building your calendar and coming to the workshop sessions in our class to work with your team members to see what they're building in their calendars and how you all can put your calendars together, so that if you had the same students in common, that they just have this outstanding and exciting experience with the theme that you all have created. Constantly think about what the goal of this course is. How are you going to engage adolescents? You're also thinking about how you're activating their prior knowledge, how you are supporting their prior knowledge so that they can do what you need them to do by the end of the unit. Think about what you want the students to be able to do at the end of the unit. It's kind of like backwards planning. So maybe you want to start with the end of the unit. If you want them, in this case, if I want my students to write arguments about eating survival, I have to get them also interested in inquiry, and I have to build in time in my calendar for them to do the research. Think about the realistic day-to-day things that need to occur. They're going to have to be able to define vocabulary and have time to write things, but they also need these strategies and resources to support them. So have fun with planning for reading response number 6. Bring all of your ideas to class so that you guys can begin to see how your master calendars are going to connect like a puzzle, how you put all the pieces together so that they're cohesive by the end. Again, writing and lesson planning is a process. It's not always linear. It can be very recursive. So please trust the process, because every time I know I go to start looking online for ideas, I never know where that new idea is going to take me down another road. So trust the process. Again, I look forward to seeing your drafts. Thanks for listening.